Students, in lesson 6.10, we are going to use properties of addition to help us add fractions with unlike denominators. So we're going to start with a real world unlock the problem and read about Jane and her family. Jane and her family are driving to Big Lagoon State Park. On the first day, they travel 1/3 of the total distance. On the second day, they travel 1/3 of the total distance in the morning, and then 1/6 of the total difference in the afternoon. How much of the total distance has Jane's family driven by the end of the day? So we're going to use the associative property here to help us start solving the problem. So day 1 and day 2, we're going to add them together. So it says we want to write the number sentence to represent the problem. Use the associative property to group the fractions with the like denominators together. So boys and girls, what we're going to do is we're going to take these two fractions and we're going to group them together. So we're going to put them in parentheses because we're going to add them first. So what we're going to do is then it says use mental math to add the fractions with the like denominators. So 1/3 plus 1/3 would be 2/3. And now we have to add the leftover fraction. Now, boys and girls, something we've learned throughout this unit is that we cannot just add the fractions with unlike denominators. We have to list the multiples and make sure that we see the patterns. So when we list the multiples of the two, boys and girls, we see that 6 is a common multiple and it will be our common denominator. So we rewrite 2/3 to be 4/6. This is an equivalent fraction. 4/6 is the equivalent fraction of 2/3. So we have 2/3 plus, let me look at that really quick again, boys and girls. So yes, 4/6 is how we rewrite 2/3. So we're going to write down 4/6 plus 1/6. Now that the denominators are same, we've written the equivalent fractions and we add them together and we get 5/6. So Jane has driven the total distance at the end of the second day of 5/6. Now boys and girls, keep in mind we wanted to group the fractions that had like denominators, and we knew if we added those two together, we can then just deal with adding the additional ones as we went through. Next, boys and girls, we're going to use the commutative and associative property to help us a little bit more, along with using properties of addition to help us add fractions with unlike denominators. So it says use the commutative property and associative property. So we have two fractions, 2 and 5/8 plus 1 and 2/3 plus 1 and 1/8. So it says use the commutative property to put fractions with like denominators next to each other. So again, boys and girls, we can simply see, well, this has a like denominator, this has a like denominator. These are the ones that we're going to put next to each other. And then the one that's left over, 1 and 2/3, goes outside of the parentheses. Boys and girls, I'm going to read that again because I think I might have confused myself when I was doing it. So it says, use the commutative property to put fractions with like denominators next to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to write out our fractions, 1 and 2/3, and then we're going to have 2 and 5/8, and then we're going to add 1 and 1/8. So what we just wanted to do, boys and girls, is we wanted to take this fraction and change its order and place it there. And then the other fraction, we wanted to put it in its other place. So now we see that the fractions that have like denominators are close together. So now in step 2, it says use the associative property to group the fractions with like denominators together. So these are the fractions that have the like denominators. So what we're going to do is we're going to group them together. This is the associative property. And then we have the 1 and 2/3 outside. Next, it says use mental math to add the fractions of like denominators together. 2 and 5/8 plus 1 and 5/8. We have 5/8 plus 1/8 is 6/8. And then we have 2 plus 1 is 3. And now we bring down the other fraction. Now it says write equivalent fractions with like denominators and then add. So what we have to think to ourselves, boys and girls, 3 and 6 have what common multiples? 3 and 8 have one common also. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12. Then we have 8. So as we list the multiples, we see that 24 is a common multiple. So we're going to rewrite both fractions with 24 in the denominator. So we have 1 and 2/3 times what number would give us 24 in the denominator, and we know that would be 8. So we multiply the top by 8, so then we get the answer of 1 and 16/24. And then we do the next. We take 3 and 6/8, and we say, well, what do we multiply the 8 by to get 24 in the denominator? And we know that we multiply 8 by 3. We must do the same to the numerator, and then we have 3 and 18/24. Now lastly, boys and girls, we add them together. We have 16 plus 18 would be 34/24, and we have 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. Now, boys and girls, we know when we get 24/24, that's the same as getting 1 whole. So this 4 would become a 5, and the additional remainder would be reduced to 5 and 5/12. So we had to rename our fractions and simplify them, because remember, whenever the numerator is larger than the denominator, it means that 1 whole is in there, and we want to trade that out for what's left over. Now we're going to use properties to solve and show each step and name the property that was used. So right off the back, when we look at these, we see that these denominators are next to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the associative property, and we're going to group the fractions that have the like denominators together in parentheses. So on the side, we're going to put down associative property. And now we're going to add the fractions that have the same denominators. So we have 1 plus 3 is equal to 4/4. And then we know that 4/4 is equal to 1 whole. So we have 1 whole plus 5, which would give us 6. And then we have the 6, and we need to add the 5. We need to add the 1 and 5/12 left over. So what we're going to do is we're just going to simply add 6 plus 1 is 7, and 5/12 left over. So 7 and 5/12 is our answer. Next, boys and girls, we have our next fraction. We look and we see that we want to place the fractions that are not close to each other, close to each other. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to use the commutative property. We're going to put the 3/10 where the 1/5 is, and the 1/5 is going to go where the 3/10 is. So we have 3/10 plus 1/5 plus 2/5. And we use the commutative property to help us with that. And now next, what we're going to do is we're going to use the associative property. So we're actually going to group the fractions with the like denominators together. And we're going to write down the outside that we use the associative property. We're going to use mental math to add 1/5 plus 2/5, which would give us 3/5. And then we're going to rewrite 5 to have the denominator of 10, because we have to rewrite 3/5 to have a denominator of 10. So the equivalent fraction, 6/10, is equal to 5/10. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add 3/10 plus 6/10, and we're going to get 9/10. So we use properties of mental math to help us expedite the adding and process for adding fractions with unlike denominators. We definitely cut down on a couple steps here too.